My name is Lena Morris. I'm 19 years old. And the day my mother turned my bedroom into a storage shelf was the day she taught me what she really meant when she said, "Family means learning to sacrifice." I came home expecting nothing unusual. My shift had ended late. My feet hurt. And all I wanted was to drop my bag on my bed and lie there for 5 minutes before dealing with the rest of the world. The apartment door was unlocked. That was the first strange thing. The second was the silence. No TV, no music, no familiar background noise that told me I was home. Then I walked down the hallway. My bedroom door was open. At least, what used to be my bedroom. My bed was no longer flat on the floor. It was standing upright, pushed against the wall like a forgotten piece of furniture. Plastic storage bins were stacked on top of it. Winter coats, old boxes, suitcases I didn't recognize. My desk was gone. In its place sat a brand new gaming setup, monitor, LED lights, headset hanging neatly on the side. Someone cleared their throat behind me. Mom said, "This side's mine." I turned. Ethan, my mom's boyfriend's son, 17, confident, already sitting in the chair like he'd always belonged there. I didn't say a word. I just backed out of the room slowly, my chest tight, my ears ringing. My mom was in the kitchen, scrolling on her phone like it was any other day. "Hey," she said casually. "You're home. What happened to my room?" I asked. She didn't look surprised. She didn't look guilty. She looked prepared. "We had to make some adjustments," she said. "Ethan moved in. He needs his own space." I waited. She didn't continue. "So where am I supposed to sleep?" I asked. She gestured toward the living room without even looking up. "The couch pulls out." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because my brain couldn't process that she was serious. "For how long?" I asked. She shrugged. "It's not permanent." I had learned by then that not permanent meant as long as I say so. Her boyfriend walked in then, hand resting on Ethan's shoulder, smiling like this was already settled. "You're the oldest," he said. "You understand sacrifice." I looked at my mom. She finally met my eyes and said the sentence that would replay in my head for weeks. "Family means learning to sacrifice." Lena. No conversation, no warning, no choice. I reminded her that I paid part of the rent, that I worked weekends, that this room had been mine for years. She sighed, annoyed. "You're being selfish," she said. "It's just a room." But it wasn't just a room. It was where I studied, where I cried quietly so no one would hear, where I locked the door when things got loud. It was the only space in that apartment that felt like mine. That night, I laid out a blanket on the couch, while laughter echoed from the room that used to hold my bed. Ethan was on a call with his friends, joking about finally having his own setup. No one checked on me. No one asked if I was okay. As I stared at the ceiling, listening to footsteps pass by like I wasn't even there, a single thought settled heavily in my chest. This wasn't about space. This was about priority. And in this new version of my family, I wasn't one. That was the night I stopped calling it my home, even though I hadn't left yet. And a few weeks later, I would make a decision they never saw coming. Have you ever been told to understand something that was quietly destroying you? If yes, you already know how this part feels. They said it was temporary. That word followed me around the apartment like a lie that wanted to sound kind. The first night on the pull-out couch, I barely slept. The springs dug into my back. The living room light from the street filtered through the blinds. And every time someone walked past, I flinched, afraid they'd remind me that I was taking up space I no longer had permission to occupy. In the morning, I folded the blanket and pillow neatly, just in case. I didn't want to give anyone a reason to complain. That became my routine. Every day before work or class, I erased myself from the living room, folded bedding, stacked it in the corner, cleared the coffee table, as if I had never slept there at all. Ethan didn't have to do that. His door stayed closed. His music played whenever he wanted. His laundry appeared clean and folded on his bed. My mom started calling the living room shared space. But it wasn't shared. It was borrowed, temporarily, conditionally. If I stayed up late studying, she sighed loudly from the bedroom. If I slept in on my day off, she accused me of being lazy. If I asked when I'd get my room back, she said I was being ungrateful. "You're older," she kept saying. "You should be more mature about this." Mature. That word was always used when she wanted me to disappear politely. One evening, I came home exhausted from work and found my notebook missing, the one I used for classes. I searched everywhere, under the couch, in the kitchen, even in my backpack. Then I saw it, on the kitchen counter, under a pile of mail, with coffee rings on the cover. Ethan had used it to write down gaming passwords. When I said something, my mom didn't apologize. "Don't make a big deal out of everything," she said. "Family shares?" But sharing only seemed to apply in one direction. I started keeping my things in my backpack. Charger, documents, headphones, anything I couldn't afford to lose, because nothing in that apartment belonged to me anymore, not even the space to exist quietly. One night, after a long shift, I sat on the couch scrolling through my phone when my mom walked in with a bag of groceries. "Can you move?" she said. "Ethan wants to watch TV." I stood up without arguing. That was the moment something inside me shifted. Not anger. Clarity. I wasn't being asked to sacrifice. I was being trained to accept less. Later that week, I overheard my mom laughing in the kitchen with her boyfriend. "She's fine," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "She's tough. She'll figure it out." Figure it out. Those words sounded familiar. I lay on the couch that night staring at the ceiling and finally admitted the truth to myself. This wasn't about making room for someone new. It was about making room by pushing me out. And the hardest part? They didn't even notice how quiet I'd become. They mistook my silence for agreement. They thought I'd stay. They were wrong, because while they slept comfortably behind closed doors, I lay awake on a couch that wasn't mine, and started planning a life that wouldn't require me to beg for space. And when I finally stood up for myself, they would call it betrayal. But I would call it survival. I didn't vanish all at once. I faded. At first, it was small things. My mug kept getting moved. My shoes were pushed to the back of the closet. Notes I left on the counter were tossed without being read. No one asked where I was going anymore, or when I'd be back. They didn't need to. I wasn't part of the schedule. Dinner happened without me. They'd eat early because Ethan had practice, or late because her boyfriend worked overtime. If I came home hungry and asked what was left, my mom would say, "There's cereal." She said it kindly, like she was being reasonable. I learned to eat quietly, standing at the counter, so I wouldn't take up the couch for too long. My mom started referring to the apartment as their home. "Ethan needs stability," she said one night while reorganizing the hallway. "We're trying to build a family here." I looked around and wondered where I fit in that sentence. The answer became clearer every day. I stopped leaving things out, stopped making noise, stopped reminding them I existed. Because every time I did, it felt like an inconvenience. One afternoon, I came home early and found my backpack sitting outside the bathroom door. Someone had gone through it. My papers were shuffled. My charger was missing. Ethan walked past me and shrugged. Mom said I could borrow it. I asked her why she hadn't told me. She sighed like I was exhausting her patience. "You don't need to be so possessive," she said. "This isn't just your space." I wanted to scream, but I didn't, because screaming would only confirm what they already believed, that I was the problem. So I learned to be invisible. I took longer routes home so I wouldn't arrive at the same time as them. I stayed late at work, sat in the library until it closed. I memorized which floorboards creaked and which doors stuck, so I wouldn't draw attention to myself. One night, I overheard my mom talking on the phone in the kitchen. "She's still sleeping on the couch," she said casually. "But she's fine. She hasn't complained in weeks." I realized then how dangerous silence can be. They thought I was okay because I had stopped asking for help. They thought I had adjusted. What I had really done was give up expecting fairness. The breaking point came quietly. I had just gotten paid and bought myself a small lockbox for my documents: birth certificate, ID, work papers. I hid it behind the couch, out of sight. 2 days later, it was gone. I found it in the hallway closet, shoved behind cleaning supplies. When I asked why it had been moved, my mom's boyfriend laughed. "What are you hiding for?" he said. "We're family." Family. That word felt like a weapon. I looked at my mom, waiting for her to say something. She didn't. That was the moment I understood something painful and final. I wasn't invisible by accident. I was invisible because it was convenient. Because if they acknowledged me, my needs, my space, my hurt, they'd have to admit they'd taken something from me. So they chose not to see me at all. That night, lying on the couch, I stared at the ceiling and made a decision I hadn't allowed myself to consider before. I stopped asking when I'd get my room back. I started asking how I was going to leave. And once that thought took root, everything changed. I became quieter, but not weaker. More distant, but more focused. Because when someone erases you slowly enough, they never expect you to walk away on your own. And they definitely don't expect what comes after. The fight didn't happen during a scream. It happened during something much worse: silence. It was late, past midnight. I came home from work exhausted, my feet aching, my head buzzing. The apartment was dark except for the light spilling from Ethan's room. His laughter echoed down the hallway, loud and careless. I stood there holding my bag, waiting for the game to pause, waiting for someone to remember I existed, waiting for the couch to become mine for the night. It didn't. When I finally asked if I could set up the bed, my mom didn't even turn around. "Not yet," she said. "Ethan's still using the living room TV." I reminded her quietly that I had work early in the morning. She sighed, irritated. "You're always complaining lately." That word hit me harder than I expected. Complaining. After weeks on a couch. After losing my room. After being erased slowly and politely. I said something I hadn't allowed myself to say before. "I don't feel like I belong here anymore." The room went still. Her boyfriend looked at me like I'd just insulted him personally. "Well," he said flatly, "maybe that's because this isn't really your place anymore." My chest tightened. I looked at my mom. She didn't defend me. She didn't correct him. She just said, "You're making things uncomfortable." That was it. That was the sentence that finally broke whatever hope I had left. Not, "You're wrong." Not, "He shouldn't say that." Just, "You're inconvenient." I grabbed my bag and walked outside. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay. I sat on the curb for a long time, watching cars pass, realizing how easily I could disappear and no one inside that apartment would notice. That's when it hit me. I wasn't homeless. I was unwanted. And those two things feel very different. When I went back inside an hour later, no one asked where I'd been. The TV was off. Lights out. Doors closed. I stood in the dark living room, holding my blanket, staring at the closed bedroom doors that no longer belonged to me. That's when I stopped calling it home in my head. From that night on, I stopped reacting. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I didn't defend myself. I started observing and planning. I counted my shifts, tracked my money, memorized which documents I needed to take. I stopped trying to earn space because I finally understood something painful and freeing at the same time. You don't fight to stay where you're already being pushed out. And when I finally left, it wouldn't be because they told me to. It would be because I chose myself. After that night, something in me went quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes from giving up, the kind that comes from deciding. I stopped trying to fix things that were never broken on my side. I stopped hoping my mom would suddenly wake up and choose me, and I stopped explaining myself. From the outside, nothing changed. I still slept on the couch, still went to work, still nodded when spoken to. still folded my blanket every morning and stacked it neatly in the corner like proof that I didn't exist too loudly. But underneath, everything shifted. I started counting hours, paychecks, days until I could leave. I opened a separate bank account they didn't know about. Nothing dramatic, just enough to keep my money safe. Every shift, I moved a little over, $20, $30, whatever I could spare. I gathered my documents quietly: birth certificate, social security card, ID, work contracts. I kept them in my backpack, which never left my side. When my mom asked why I was suddenly so secretive, I shrugged. "You told me family means sacrifice," I said. "I'm learning." She smiled like she'd won something. That was the part she never understood. I wasn't sacrificing myself anymore. I was preparing to leave her. I talked less, not out of fear, but because silence gave me information. I learned how little they noticed me when I wasn't useful. Ethan never asked why I was gone so often. Her boyfriend never asked where I worked. And my mom? She seemed relieved. She thought the problem had solved itself. I started spending more time outside the apartment, the library, coffee shops, a coworker's place after closing. Anywhere that didn't make me feel like an extra chair shoved into the corner of someone else's life. One night, I overheard my mom talking on the phone again. "She's finally adjusting," she said. I knew she would. "She's independent." Independent. That word used to sound like a compliment. Now I knew it meant alone. I applied for a room through a co-worker's aunt who rented to students. Small, old, shared kitchen. But it had a door that closed, and a bed that stayed flat on the floor. When I got the message saying the room was mine if I wanted it, I didn't cry. I exhaled. For the first time in weeks, my chest felt lighter. I signed the agreement the next day, quietly, during my lunch break. I didn't tell my mom. I didn't owe her an explanation. That night, she complained about the electric bill and hinted that I should contribute more since I was basically an adult now. I nodded. In my head, I counted down the days. 3 weeks later, I started packing. Not everything, just what mattered. Clothes, documents, a few books, my laptop. I left behind things that belonged to a version of me that had believed love was conditional. As my bag slowly filled, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not sadness, relief. Because the hardest part, realizing I wasn't wanted, was already behind me. What came next was just logistics. And when I finally walked out that door, they would think it was sudden. They would think I was dramatic. They would say they never saw it coming. But I had been leaving that apartment long before my feet ever crossed the threshold. And when I did, they would finally understand what sacrifice really cost. I left on a Wednesday, not because it meant anything, but because Wednesdays were quiet. My mom worked late. Ethan had practice. The apartment would be empty for exactly 40 minutes. I had timed it. I packed the rest of my things the night before and lined them up behind the couch. 2 bags, 1 backpack. That was all. Everything else I left behind on purpose. I wanted the exit to be clean. That morning, I folded the blanket for the last time, smoothed the cushions, wiped down the coffee table. I even took the trash out. Old habits die hard. I stood in the living room for a moment, looking around at the space where I'd learned how to disappear, the couch where I slept, the corner where I stored my life during the day, the wall that had absorbed weeks of quiet. No one was there to see me go. That felt right. I opened the door and stepped into the hallway with my bags. My heart was steady, not racing, not breaking, just ready. Halfway down the stairs, I heard a door open behind me. My mom. She stared at the bags first, then at me. "What's this?" she asked. "I'm moving out," I said. She blinked. Once, twice. "You didn't tell me," she said, irritation creeping into her voice. "I didn't think I needed permission," I replied. She scoffed. "You're being dramatic. Where are you even going?" Somewhere I have a room, I said simply. Her face hardened. So this is how you repay everything I've done for you? She asked. You just leave? I looked at her for a long moment. You gave my room away, I said. You turned my bed into storage. You told me family means sacrifice, and then watched while I gave up everything. That's not what happened, she snapped. It is, I said. You just didn't think I'd stop accepting it. Her boyfriend appeared behind her, arms crossed. If you walk out now, he said, don't expect to come back. I nodded. I'm not planning to. That was when her expression changed. Not angry, panicked. You're overreacting, she said quickly. We could have worked something out. Worked something out? After weeks on a couch, after being erased, after being told my presence was inconvenient, I picked up my bags. I already did, I said. She watched me walk down the stairs, her mouth opening like she wanted to say something else. She didn't. Outside, the air felt different, lighter, like I could breathe without measuring myself. I didn't cry. I didn't look back. I got on the bus with my bags and sat by the window, watching the building shrink behind me. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't leaving because I was unwanted. I was leaving because I finally wanted something better. That night, I slept in a bed that was mine. A real one, flat on the floor, with a door that closed, and in the quiet, I realized something important. Walking away didn't make me heartless. It made me honest. The silence didn't last long. 3 days after I moved out, my mom texted me, "Did you take the router?" I stared at the message for a long moment, then locked my phone and went back to studying. It was the first sign she'd noticed something was missing. Not me, convenience. A week later, she called. "Where are you staying?" she asked, her voice tight. "You didn't think to tell me?" "I told you I was moving out," I said. "That wasn't serious," she snapped. "You're being stubborn." I almost laughed. Stubborn was what she called me whenever I stopped bending. Ethan didn't adjust well. Without my couch to sleep on, the living room had to stay clear. The TV schedule changed. The apartment felt smaller. No one folded blankets anymore. No one picked up the slack quietly. Her boyfriend started complaining about the mess. My mom started complaining about money. That's when the messages changed. "Can you come over and help clean? We're family." This didn't have to turn into something so extreme. Extreme. Weeks on a couch weren't extreme. Giving my room away wasn't extreme. Turning my bed into storage wasn't extreme. But me leaving? That crossed a line. I didn't respond. I was busy building routines that didn't revolve around being tolerated. Then one evening, she showed up at my new place unannounced. I heard the knock and froze. When I opened the door, she looked around like she was taking inventory. The small room, the narrow bed, the desk by the window. "This is it?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "And it's enough," she scoffed. "You threw away your family for this?" I met her eyes. "You gave me away first." She didn't like that answer. She said I was ungrateful, that I'd embarrassed her, that people were asking questions. "What did you tell them?" she demanded. "The truth," I said. She went quiet. For the first time, she didn't have a response ready. She left shortly after, saying she hoped I'd come to my senses. I never did. Months passed. I worked more, slept better, took up space without apologizing. Slowly, I stopped bracing for doors to open without warning. I heard through others that things at the apartment weren't as smooth as she'd expected. Arguments, tension, complaints about privacy. Turns out, sacrifice feels different when you're the one being asked to make it. The last message I ever got from her came late one night. "I didn't think you'd really leave." I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed back, "Neither did I," until I had to. I didn't block her. I didn't argue. I just let the space exist. Because sometimes the strongest consequence isn't anger, it's absence. And the family that taught me to sacrifice never learned what it cost, until they lost the one person who'd been paying the price all along.